Hi, in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to use JFrame to connect to a web service. To save time, I've pre-built my form. I've also added in all of my dependencies that I need for the project, and I've created my student class. If you're not sure what dependencies and what the class should look like, take a look at my previous video that does it in a command line interface. In a nutshell, to add a dependency, you simply right-click Add in Dependency and type in what you want. And then find the ones you want and select POM and hit Add. The dependencies you need are the Jackson annotations, Jackson data bind, Jackson core, and you need the HTTP client. Your student class, this maps to my class that my service responds back to. And if you look at this in Postman, we see I'm getting back a student ID, a first name, and a last name. Okay, so let's build this GUI. Okay, so I've got my frame built. If you're not sure how to build this thing, it's a right click, it's just a new JFrame form. I have a video series online that will walk you through the creation of one of these. Okay, so we need to make a couple setups. First, I'm going to modify this model. I'm going to cheat here. If I were to do this properly, I would read from my service and pull down all of my service or my student IDs. I'm not. I'm going to simply type them. There's only 4 of them. So I'm typing them in there. And that puts them in the drop down when it runs. Again, I would rather do this dynamically, but I'm trying to save some time. For my students combo here, this guy is called student JList. I need to set this to hold an object, so instead of string, I'm going to force this to hold an object type student, which of course is my class. This is going to allow me to put an object directly in here, and the toString that I have in my student class will be what gets displayed here. Okay, so my POM is set up. Let's write my code. Let's go to the source. Scroll all the way up to the top. I'm going to create several variables. I already have my imports as well. All right, HTTP clients. Oh, that's me. Okay, so closable HTTP client is what allows me to connect to the web. It's closable means it's handles sync and async. Okay. I need to build a list model. It's going to hold a student. This is how I'm going to write to that JList on the screen. I'll define this later. I'm going to fix imports as I go along here. Create a student up here, so I might need this 6 times for an error message. And I'll set the ID to -1. 0 is defined as all. And I'll create a method that I'm going to use in a few minutes. Fill this is going to fill that list box on the screen. And it accepts a variable of type integer. Okay, so student list model is going to allow me to read and write to the screen in that list, so I need to set this up. You see that it's going to be a student, and as you recall, we set this guy here, this JList combo, or this JList, to accept that student. So down here, my constructor, and this is the name of my form GUI client video. It's just the name of your form. Make sure you put it after init components. Init components is this big ugly method down here that you can't see that writes everything to the screen. So I'm going to set this to be a default list model, but I'm going to typecast it to be a student. And I'm going to set that to my model. And then a student JList as my list. Set model. This maps this variable in memory to this variable on the screen. If I run this thing, it should work. I should have a drop down of 0 through 451 and nothing in here. Beautiful. And then fill list. Fill list is going to actually fill this drop down box. Okay, I'm going to write fill list last. Let's create a default event handler for my drop down here. If you could write this thing, you can do events. You see I already have action performed built, but you have dozens of events you can pick here. If you're not sure what event to pick, just double click the object and it'll create the default object for you. So I'm going to do a J option action performed, which is simply picking the object. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to strip off of this JCombo, pull the number out, and pass it into fill list. Get selected item index. Item is the object in the screen. Index is the number. Make sure you pick item. That's going to return back 0, 7, 42, etc. It defaults to a string, so I write it into a string and then I parse it in. Okay, so this pulls off my combo box, puts it as an integer, and I pass that integer into fill list. Okay, again, make sure that we don't get any ridiculous errors here. It's going to run it. Okay, I'm good. So now let's write fill list. What fill list has to do, fill list has to use the Apache HttpClient to connect this to the service. It also has to rewrite the model. So I'm going to start by clearing the model. I'm simply clearing out the model. My thought process is I pick different students. I don't want to see the old students there. I just want to see the one I've selected. Okay, these things throw a bunch of errors that I'm pretty much going to ignore. Again, bad programming, but I'm trying to focus on the thought process, not making this completely verbose. The primary area we're going to get here is an IO exception error. Let's see if I can spell exception right. Again, I'm ignoring it, so I'll fix some imports. I still can't spell exception. This is all day. Alright, so it's yelling at me because nothing up here throws an error. We'll solve that problem. Okay, so I'm going to build a URL. The URL is going to depend on whether I'm searching for all these students or an individual students. If we go back to post and we can see this. Here I'm searching for an individual students. And if I turn that off, I'm searching for all students. When I get all students, I get these 4 people back. When I search for an individual student, I get that particular student back. So I'm basically going to if it. So if student ID is 0, I'm going to set the URL equal to this. And that is the path to my running service. Otherwise, I'm going to set my URL to this guy. You see the question mark in the variable. Oops, square quotes. I'm going to use string.format to write this rather than string concatenation. %d is the integer placeholder. Okay, so depending on whether they pass in a 0 or they pass in a number, I'm going to get two different results. 0 is going to display all students. A number is going to display that particular student. Since I created the drop-down box, it has the correct numbers. I shouldn't get an error on this, but I'm still going to watch for it. Okay, so now let's build the connection. Remember, stay inside here. Okay, so I'm going to use the Apache HttpGet tool. So HttpGet uses the HttpGet protocol or command to send information to the chosen URL. So this sets it up. We're now going to run it. I'm going to generate a closable HTTP response. I'm going to have to import that. Response is going to hold the JSON that my document sends back. I have to parse it and play with it with Jackson, but it holds the data. Okay, I'm also going to convert this response to an HTTP entity. This gives me a little more power later on. I'm not sure if it's entirely needed here, but it's a good habit. Again, fix my imports. I love fix imports. Okay, so now whenever you're dealing with web services, you need to check your status. So I need to get the status line. I'm going to get the status code. 200, of course, is everything's okay. If it's not equal to 200, I'm going to throw an error. You know what? Let's make this easier. I'm going to display the URL here and I'll put service here in the title. I'm going to display the status code up there, of course, so I can handle this. Now, if your service responds with multiple different service errors, you should if for each one. 401, 404, etc. And then since I use the title, I got to put in the data type. Okay, so it's only going to happen if I don't get her 200. And if that's the case, I'm going to add the not found object to the list. And add does exactly that. Add element is the object, and it's going to be my not found. And I'm going to return. So I should never get something other than 200. But this is really good practice to get into, just in case your service craps out. You want to check it. Alright, so if I get past here, I know my service didn't die. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Jackson to convert this over to a list of students, and then put the list of students inside of the JList. I need to import the Jackson stuff. I need to import Java util here. I'll handle that. I'm trying to do this quickly because there's a lot here. I don't want an hour-long video. Alright, it's angry at me. Just manually do this. That should have dropped them before. Okay. Okay, so I got my list of students. Stud list should be everything off the list. So let's now fill it. Thank you for helping me. So I'm going to pass into this. I'm going to pass in my entity, but I have to convert it to an entity utils. Entity utils comes with the Apache HttpClient. Pass in the entity I created above. And I'm going to make this a list of students. I'm going to use the type reference here. Let's see if I got that right. How about that? I did. Need to make this go away for now. Fix my imports. Beautiful. All right, entity utils is exactly that. It's utilities on the entity class. I convert this to a string because mapper wants a string. This entity should hold the JSON that comes back from my service. This converts it over to a list of students, so now stud list will be a list of students. I love Jackson. It just makes that so simple as opposed to you for eaching and walking through it and converting yourself. Okay, so now I should be able to add this to my model. So I'm going to use the for each model here because I don't necessarily know how many I'm going to get back, and I don't feel like counting. Oops. Don't want to add another event handler. Okay, so this adds each one of my students to that list model. It'll use the toString to display on the object. So if I look at my student Java here, I've got a cheesy toString that returns by first name, last name, and their ID. So let's see if it works. Ooh, didn't die. Okay, so I had a problem, and I figured out what my problem was. I did so by throwing a simple JOption pane down here in my execution. So we'll run this, and we'll see the error. Does not specify valid hostname, localhost. I forgot the HTTP. So let's go up and fix that. That's kind of childish. So let's run this again. There we go. Alright, so in this video you saw how to use HttpClient in a Java JFrame GUI. JFrame is pretty popular. It's not the newest Java GUI. That goes to Java FX, but the thought process would be the same. Put this into the event handler. Likewise, if you want to do this in an Android app, the same idea. Figure out your event handler and throw in your code to connect. All right, thanks for listening. Good luck, guys.